high points have to be with the string project, because that was my creation, and it was experimental, and it allowed me to play all this great music that we as bass players are denied.
It was a real pleasure connecting with today's guest again for the podcast. He was on the show in the early days. He was one of the few interviews I did when I basically retired from this show for about 5 years, and he is now retiring himself from the University of Washington. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking today with Barry Lieberman, who was in the LA Phil for many years before the University of Washington. He's had this wonderful chamber series for years and years called Barry Lieberman and Friends. I put out an episode with Gary Karr that he did several years ago on the podcast on YouTube. That's all linked up. And boy, Barry, you get on the line with Barry and it's like a masterclass in the bass world and what to check out in the bass world. So I've linked up to as much as I can in the show notes. So definitely check out as he's referencing these different players that he's added in through the years. Just super interesting. We recorded this on March 10th. I am talking to you right now on March 26th. And it's amazing how in those 16 days, I won't constantly talk about the coronavirus on this show, I promise, but just March 26th, maybe remember back to how you felt then. Boy, 16 days, how much has changed? It's incredible. But I just congratulate Barry on his retirement and everything he's done over the years. And I know you're going to love this conversation. Before we get rolling, just thank you so much to these companies, large and small, that have helped me out and the podcast out over the years. I just really appreciate their support. And if there's anything you can do to support them during these economic times, I know that they would appreciate it. Thank you to Upton Bass, D'Addario Strings, the Bass Violin Shop, Steve Swan String Bass, Kolstein Music, A440 Violin Shop, and Modacity. Let's get into it. Here's Barry Lieberman.
Listen, you have to go to Tadich Grill.
Oh, I'm ashamed I haven't. I walk by there all the time, and I just haven't. But I think it's on California or Sacramento or something like that. It's just south of me.
Yeah, and it's the oldest restaurant in San Francisco, and you have to get. Do you like lobster?
Oh yeah, I love lobster.
Lobster Thermidor. It's going to change your life. I promise. I promise. They don't take reservations. So when you go there, either go really early, like 5 o'clock, or go really late, like 10 o'clock. Either one.
I could definitely, I've walked by there so many times and I look in and it's always packed and there are people, yeah.
It's packed. And the thing is, it's a huge bar and people stand behind you waiting for your seat. It's a little weird, but it's so worth it. That's why I say go early or really late, and you probably won't have to wait.
Yeah, I got to go there. I love the old school San Francisco place. I know I'll love that place. That's we live.
You will love it.
We live in North Beach, so we're just slightly north of there.
Yeah.
And it's it's just a lot of good San Francisco history around here.
Oh, it's great. And then, you got to go back and watch Vertigo. That movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's all old San Francisco there. And Bullet.
Bullet? Yep. There's another classic. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, we love San Francisco. Maria grew up in Oakland.
Oh. So, okay.
Yeah, we haven't been back in a while, but it's a great city. It really is. A lot of good bass players there.
A lot of good bass players. Yeah, it's a really interesting place just in terms of, it reminds me a little bit of like an East Coast city that got plopped on the West Coast, with
exactly.
the opera and the ballet and the symphony and just the cultural institutions. It kind of feels like that.
Yeah, the Opera House is fantastic. I'm sure you've been there.
Yep.
And Joe Lescher?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, he's a good friend of mine. He used to be in the orchestra here.
That's right.
Seattle before he moved there. What a great player.
Yeah.
Great guy. And, I have to put him on my list. I have this huge list of guest artists that we've had here.
Yeah, he is. I have Joe went to school at DePaul University in Chicago, and
Yeah.
he went right at the same time as some people that I did a lot of work with back in Chicago. So we have a lot of friends in common from back then.
Oh yeah, well, he's a great guy and a great player, and I hope it seems like he's doing well there.
He seems happy. It seems like a really good job. There's not a lot of turnover in that section, so
No.
people seem to like that and get in and stay.
It's not that big, right? It's only 4 or 5 players, I think.
Yeah. Shinji Ishima, Joe, a few other people, but yeah, it's a smaller section, but beautiful opera house, and the orchestra sounds great, and
yeah. I'm sure he does. I don't know if you've ever heard. If you've gotten to hear Rigoletto or Othello or any of those.
Yeah, actually, funny you should mention it. So I did see Rigoletto with SF Opera, and then they were doing it in the summer, and then that same summer we had our Golden Gate Bass Camp here, and Joe did an arrangement of Rigoletto for bass singer, solo bass, and then bass ensemble. And so I have some video floating around somewhere of us all doing that with, and the singer was the singer from the opera company. So it was a great performance.
I bet that was really good.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah. And you got Scott Pingle there, who is also an awesome player.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he's been here too. I have a whole list of all the guest artists we've had here that I'll read to you when you're ready for it.
I would love, because I was going through and sketching out like all the various projects and things that you've done. Oh, I mean, my iPad is full of notes of like looking back at and I was even looking back at when the first time we chatted for the podcast, I think was 2008. So that was like 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
And then I think we chatted in 2014, which is like six years ago. So it's been a while. So it's good. It has been a while. Yeah, but it's incredible to see. So tell me if you've got that list, I'd love to hear it.
I do. You want me to just tell you?
Do it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to read these names, and if there's one that I think people won't know, I'll explain who they are.
Okay.
So we've had, I have this series here. It's called Barry Lieberman and Friends. And it started off as being chamber music. It was my experimental stage before we ended up doing the American String Project. So I would try adding the bass to a Mozart string quartet or a Brahms string quartet, and it just as 5 players, and it worked sometimes with some things like Shostakovich and Brahms. They worked, but Mozart and Haydn, they didn't work at all because the bass just completely overbalanced them. So, and that's sort of how we ended up developing the American String Project. But so at first, this series was that, and then I transitioned it into just a showcase for bass players, and so we invited a whole bunch of people, and they're all pretty famous bass players. They all came. They all did a master class, and then on Sunday they would do a recital. And we have all of those archived in the music library. It's really great to go. I have all of them at home too, but so here's the list of the people that we've had up to this year. So we've got Joel Quarrington, who's principal in the National Arts Center Orchestra, but he's more famous as a soloist, I think. Diana Gannett, John Patitucci, great jazz player, and one of my students in LA. Donovan Stokes, Max Dimhoff twice, Edgar Meyer, Gary Karr 4 times, and that includes the interviews I did, which are on YouTube with him. Hal Robinson, Chris Brown, who's the former principal of St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, Tom Martin 3 times, Ron Carter, Katalin Rotaru, who I'm sure everybody knows by now. They should know who he is. And the first U.S. performance of Ovidiu Badila. There's a recital CD that you can get from the ISB that's a live recording of his recital here, which is really great. Okay, and going on, Chichi Nwanoku was here. John Clayton, Jordan Anderson, who's the principal of Seattle Symphony. He's done one almost every year here. And Joe Kaufman, also a member of Seattle Symphony. Roma Vayspapir. Do you know who that is?
No.
Oh, well, this is somebody you need to know who it is. And in fact, I will try to send you a copy of his CDs. He was the principal of the Leningrad Symphony and grew up at the same time as Eugene Levinson in Russia. And he ended up moving to Spokane. He's my favorite bass soloist of all time. And then Scott Pingle, Colin Corner was here last year. He's now living in the Northwest in Portland. Rustem Gabdullin, do you know who that is?
No.
Rustem is also a great player. I think you can find him on YouTube. And he's the principal of the Russian National Orchestra. And Bob Gladstone, do you know that name?
Yeah.
He was principal of Detroit and my primary teacher. And Ted Botsford, who is now in LA Phil. Chris Burns, who's the principal of Tacoma, has done a few classes and a recital. He played the Angel of Dusk, if you know that piece. Do you know that?
Yeah,
it's by Rautavaara, and I think it's the best bass concerto in existence. It's a fantastic piece, and you can do it with 2 pianos and percussion. Is the reduced version.
Wow.
And Michael Hovnanian,
Sure.
I know you know Michael. Travis Gore, who's a member of the Seattle Symphony. And that's the end of my list. So
it's a good list.
It's a pretty good list. For 30 years, yeah.
It's remarkable. Michael Hovnanian came out maybe, I want to say 7 years ago or something, because he took a sabbatical from the Chicago Symphony.
Yep. That's when he was here.
Yeah, because I remember he came and stayed in San Francisco for a few months and then went up to Seattle. And I know he's from Seattle. And yes. I remember him saying he was doing a session and coming and visiting you for your series. So that's very cool. Wow.
Yeah. And he did a great recital. Fantastic recital. He played the whole Bach Fifth Suite, I think, and a whole bunch of other stuff. He's a great player. For somebody who's been in orchestra that long, sometimes long-term orchestra players don't go out and play recitals very often.
Yeah, not always, but I love that you've had Gary Karr those multiple times, and I remember fondly that I love the way that you approached it was an evening with Gary Karr, I think you called it, or something along those lines, and you were pulling out all these recordings and listening to them with Gary of all. It was just I'll make sure to link up to that if people haven't checked that out, because it's just a really it was a really enjoyable way to like take a look at what he'd done over the years. I thought that was incredibly cool.
Well, he won't do master classes.
Yeah.
He says, and he won't do recitals, he says. And he lives in Victoria, which is, I don't know, 3 hours from Seattle.
Yeah.
By ferry. And he also has family in Seattle. And so we became friends over time, and he would come here and he'd have dinner here. And I wanted to bring him here, but he wouldn't do a class and he wouldn't do a recital. So I said, well, how about if we do something like an interview of some sort and videotape it? Mm-hmm. And he thought that was a great idea. So he brought his bass and he brought his partner.
Yep. Harmon.
Yeah. And so I thought, now what am I going to do with him? What can we possibly do? And I have all his recordings. I'm sure you do too.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's quite a few now. There's at least 20 recordings, I would say, maybe more than that. Mm-hmm. And of course, I still had the first album he did, which was groundbreaking for us bass players. You're not old enough to have remembered that when that came out, but I am. And where he did Eccles and Moses variations. And so I thought, I'm going to go through all the recordings. I'm going to listen to all of them. And then I'm going to play them for him and ask him to tell me the backstories to all of them.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a really great idea. I thought, well, this is either going to be great or it's going to be terrible. And he loved it. He just loved doing it. And especially bringing out that very first recording, because he said he hasn't listened to his recordings at all. Barely, and especially that one, he hadn't gone back to it. So, yeah, they turned out to be really good videos and interviews. I think they've had a lot of views on.
Oh yeah,
they have, and my YouTube also has had. I'm over 600,000 views now for those.
I'm not surprised. I remember when you were coming out with those videos and your ridiculous Magini bass,
which is right back there in the corner.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Yeah, no, it's so cool to and I've referenced those over the years with students and when people are asking. So I think that was a really cool project to do, and I'm not surprised it's gotten that many views. So that was.
I am.
It's kind of scary if you think about
maybe,
it.
A couple hundred people would watch it, but it's pretty comprehensive for all the solo music, all the orchestral solo music, and it was kind of inspired by Larry Hurst, and who was did I read his name? I think I did, but
I think so. But
if I didn't, he was here, and because he produced this book. I don't know if you have it, but it's a book of all the orchestral solos. Do you know that?
I know the book. I don't think I have the book, but I think maybe Michael Ovnanian had the book, or I've definitely seen the book. I don't have it here in San Francisco, sadly.
If you write to him, I'm sure you have his address, or he will send it to you for whatever it costs for him to make it, and it's great because it has all the major solos, even some of the minor solos. So it's got all the Haydn solos, which there are 5 of, and Kijé, of course, and it has both Hinasteras, the Concerto for Strings. I didn't put that one on there because I just can't play that. I don't have the chops for that.
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one. I mean, and I had to practice it for some audition way back. And Maria said, if you ever have to practice that again, I'm going to leave you. But I wanted to put Rigoletto out there and Othello, and I included the recitative because that's kind of a bass solely. And so, I'm happy with how that turned out.
Yeah.
Very difficult to do, but I'm happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, the pressure's on when you got that camera on and you're trying to do those.
And you can't edit.
Right.
There's no editing.
Right.
So you have to play through the whole thing. And I remember when I did the recording, and I had to pay for the video guy and the audio guy. I remember that when I went through all those solos, the last one, I don't know why I saved it for last, but it was the young person's guide. And so I would record it and it would be great. And then I'd miss that last note, which is probably the most missed note of all orchestra auditions, the high G.
The most missed note in orchestral auditions.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. And then I'd have to go back and start from the beginning again and just, pray that I was going to hit it the next time. So then the next day when we redid all of them, I did that first.
Yeah.
Because then I was fresher and I had a chance to practice it for a couple hours. So I got it. I nailed it. But it took me a couple 20 times to get it.
Yeah. When did you? I'm just thinking back to there's so many things in Barry Lieberman and Friends and those videos, and then certainly the American String Project. I remember chatting with you about that back, in the late aughts or whatever you want to call them. And I remember like Steve Balderston would come out from right, and a whole bunch of folks. That what a cool project. How many recordings in total did you do, or how many sessions in total did you do of that? Because it was an annual event for a while, right?
It was an annual event. It was 1 week every year.
Yeah.
Which presented problems for selling tickets and stuff like that. But
sure.
We did it for 10 years. We went 2001 to 2010.
Wow.
And so we produced a CD every year that was sort of the best of that year's series. So we did, everything from Ravel Quartet to almost all the Shostakovich, a whole bunch of Beethoven quartets, almost all the Mendelssohn quartets, a lot of Haydn quartets, the Verdi quartet.
Wow.
And lots of other things too. So like I did my own arrangement of the Barber Adagio, where where he has the bass stop for about 300 bars.
Right. Long time.
I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So I just played the whole cello part, even though it's way, way up there. But I think it sounds a lot better than his arrangement.
Yeah.
And I think the best review I got was from Strad magazine, which said that the Schubert quartet, Death and the Maiden, was arranged by Mahler and by me, and they liked mine better. That was my favorite review.
That's high praise. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. What year did you get to University of Washington again?
1991.
Okay.
Yeah, which was a year after we moved here. So
Wow.
It's almost 30 years. It's just shy by a year.
That's great. That's great. What do you see? What's next for you? What do you think? Are you staying in town? Are you
Well, for the moment, Maria's father-in-law is here. I mean, my father-in-law, her father, he's here in a nursing home, and he's fine as long as he's here. We're not going to go anywhere. But Maria has become the artistic director of the String Orchestra of the Rockies.
Oh, wow.
Which is in Missoula.
Cool.
And so she does 4 concerts there every year. And it's actually very much like the String Project, except they use local musicians instead of people from all over the world, like we did with the String Project. So, and she loves Missoula. I don't know if you've ever been there, but
only driving through, it's beautiful. I've definitely enjoyed the time. I grew up in South Dakota, so I have family in Seattle, and so we would drive out every summer or two, and gorgeous part of the country.
It's a great part of the country. It's a small college town, but really beautiful. Huey Lewis lives there, right outside. I just read a big article about him. You know who Huey Lewis?
Oh yeah, hasn't he been losing his hearing? I was reading
he lost his hearing. He can't hear amplified music, and which would for somebody in his line of work, that's kind of a death toll. So he stopped working, and he lives on this 100-acre ranch near Missoula.
Wow.
And but he's trying some experimental procedures, and he's hoping that he's going to get it back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great that Maria's involved like that.
He does that, and I'll be playing with them next year after I retire from the school here. So I'll probably be playing most of the concerts there with her. As far as for the rest, I don't really know. I just have no idea. I know that I just can't teach the Dragonetti again. I just can't do it.
I think that's very understandable.
Yeah. And, I love Kusevitsky and Bottesini, but I really love Mozart and Shostakovich more.
Yeah.
I won't lie and say I love all the bass music that's out there.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
No one will fault you for that.
No.
Well, if you look back at the almost 30 years, certainly high points like Barry Lieberman and Friends and some of these other projects, maybe less high points like teaching the Dragonetti for forever. But what are some other memories from your time here, or favorite moments, or I'm sure several come to mind.
Well, yeah. I kind of have to go back to my days in the LA Philharmonic.
Yeah.
I was assistant principal and was there for 16 years. And it was sort of like the golden age of that orchestra, because we had Eric Leinsdorf and Giulini was one of our music directors.
Oh, wow.
And Zubin Mehta, who hired me, and I got to play with Boulez a lot. I got to do Histoire with him. Mm-hmm. And Simon Rattle was a regular fixture there, and I got to do a lot of chamber works with him conducting.
Yeah.
And so all those, and we toured everywhere and played in La Scala and Concertgebouw and Berlin and Paris and all the big halls, and in Tokyo and other parts of the Far East. So orchestrally, those were kind of the highlights of my time there.
I'm sure, yeah.
And then since moving here, it's got to be my high points have to be with the string project, because that was my creation, and it was experimental, and it allowed me to play all this great music that we as bass players are denied. And, we just don't, unless you're in an orchestra, you just don't get to play Ravel and Shostakovich and Mahler. I miss Mahler the most, probably. And there's no Mahler chamber music. So there's just one piece, which is a piano quartet, which we couldn't do with the string project. And so, that was for me the high point of what I've done here in Seattle.
Sure.
followed by all the great students I've had. And, I've got 2 in Juilliard now and 1 going to NEC next year. And I've had some good success with teaching, and I love teaching. It's just, actually, I love going to school and working with them, even if they're not. A lot of them are not music majors. A lot of them are kids who played in high school and they ended up going to University of Washington because they're going to be engineers or doctors or something, architects.
Yeah.
And they played bass in high school and they wanted to continue it. And I thought that was great. So anybody who was even semi-talented, I would take in my class if I had room. And in a lot of ways, those students ended up being the most rewarding because they did it because they really loved it.
Yeah.
And they didn't have that pressure of auditions and auditioning for summer camps and auditioning for orchestras. And so I've really enjoyed that part of it. And I know you have had similar experience with high school kids.
It's been really interesting. I think, I love that you enjoyed particularly those students that don't have that audition for. There's something beautiful about working with someone, and you can the goal. You don't have all these short-term goals as much. You can kind of really work on musical development, and I've really enjoyed working with students like that more and more as I've gotten older too.
Yeah, and I make them do the master classes though. I tell them, you're not just going to practice in a practice room and play by yourself.
Yeah.
Or just go to orchestra. I want you to get out there, get on a stage and feel what it's like to have that. Because it's both joyous and terrible at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
As we all know, right?
For sure. Yep.
Especially for bass players who don't get to play solos very often.
Yeah.
And once in a while they'll screw up and, it goes badly. And I'll say, okay, well, you just got to get back up on the saddle for the next one and prepare better and do it and get that bad taste out of your mouth.
Right.
Yeah. So I do make them perform. Because I think that's part of training.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But they do it because they love it, which is really, not that the music majors don't love it. They do.
Right.
But for them, it's sort of like, well, what do I have to do to train? How am I going to do that? And what do I have to learn? And then you have to feed them all the orchestra music and, which they like, but not as much as playing solos.
Right. Of course.
Plus, they get to play with piano then, too, which is something that I didn't get till I was way late in my teens before I actually sat down and played with a pianist with me.
Yeah. That's so important to get at an earlier age, like that, because that experience, it feels incredibly weird at first until you get used to that experience of collaborating with piano. Yeah. That's something that I think still a lot of people get far too late in their development.
Bass players.
Yeah. Bass players. Exactly.
Yeah. Bass players. Yeah. Bass players and maybe, bassoon players or tuba players or something like that. But for sure for us, it's important. And as the years have gone by, I've started having piano more in my lessons when they're ready for it. Yeah. Because it's a whole different experience than just playing by yourself. They all of a sudden they understand the meaning of the word metronome.
Right.
And why it's important. They get that when they try to play with somebody. Especially something like the Hindemith Sonata.
Oh, yeah.
Or something contemporary. And, there's a lot of good stuff like Montag and Mishek and stuff like that, which only, normal people don't know who those people, those composers are, but we do.
Yeah.
because Mishek is almost like Brahms,
Oh
really.
yeah, for sure.
And the E minor sonata is fantastic. It's a great piece. Just nobody knows it because it's a
Yeah.
bass solo.
So it is a wonderful piece. I just heard that in recital. Where I don't remember where that was, but just a couple months ago, and I was just thinking about that. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah, that's a juicy romantic sonata that we can
It is.
really sink our teeth into.
Yeah, and it's really difficult.
Yeah,
It's
for
super,
sure.
super difficult. I think it's more difficult than Kusevitsky or Bottesini because it requires a completely different kind of technique, especially bow technique. And it's not so idiomatic as those pieces.
Right.
So you've got to stretch yourself. And then, like, as I was saying before about concertos, this Angel of Dusk, by Ratavara is a fantastic piece. There's a great recording of Esko Line. You know, Esko is Philharmonic.
Yeah.
And he does a fantastic performance of it.
Yeah, I've heard that piece played once. I believe it was in the Chicago area. I believe I'm remembering this right, but it was like 15 years ago, maybe something like that. And I remember looking through the bass part and checking it. Incredible piece. You should try to tackle that.
Piece.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic piece, and it suits the bass so well. And the only comparable living composer to Ratavara is Vosks, Pateris Vosks.
Pateris Vosks.
And I don't know if you know who that is.
No.
Pateris Vosks writes great string music. And he's a bass player. And he lives in Latvia.
Okay.
And he wrote 2 amazing bass solos. And they're actually solos. There's no accompaniment.
Oh.
One's called Bass Sonata, and the other one's called Bass Trip.
Huh.
And they're fantastic music. I highly encourage you and whoever is listening to this to seek that out. He also wrote a great violin concerto, which Maria has played.
Oh, wow.
So we know him. And
Cool.
he's about my age, and he's an amazing composer.
Wow. Okay.
And we did one of his string quartets with the String Project.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Wow. You've given me like all kinds of people I need to check out more. I love it. So I love that some of these folks that you brought in for your series too. I know I've heard the names, but not. And some of them I'm hearing for the first time. So it's I'm good. I got.
Yeah. Well, Roma Vayspapir is. He's when they were looking for a principal bass when Zubin Mehta took over the New York Philharmonic, and they were looking for a new principal bass after John Brennan left.
Yeah.
And Robert Brennan. Robert. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. By the way, there's this great. I found the other day one of the Bernstein Young People's concerts on YouTube. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I mean, the one with not necessarily. Tell me about this one.
Okay, well, Bernstein did a series on television,
right?
And it was called the Young People's Guide or Young People's Concerts, and he would have the New York Philharmonic. It was on TV. It was in the early '60s. It's where Gary Karr had his first debut.
Oh, that's the one where he played the Swan up the octave. That's
He plays
the
the
series.
Swan.
Okay.
He plays the Bach Prayer. And he plays the Paganini variations, and it's all there. It's on YouTube. You can access the whole complete concert.
Oh, cool.
And but during that concert, I've seen it because I wanted to see the Gary Karr segment, and I watched that, and then I started watching the whole thing, and I don't remember why, but they do the elephant They do the
Oh.
Carnival of the Animals, and they do the elephant, and they show the bass section up close.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great things about that is you get to see Fred Zimmerman. Do you know who Fred Zimmerman was?
Sure, of course. I've practiced many A&E bowing patterns from his book.
Exactly. But he did so much for the bass
Yeah.
because all those early solo editions for international music was Fred Zimmerman edited.
Yeah.
And so all the things like Kusevitsky Concerto, the Eccles, the Vivaldi sonatas, all those things that he edited. And there's something called a practice tape of his.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure I think I've seen it on your site.
Oh yeah, I don't know where on earth I got that from. Somebody passed it along to me. Yeah, I think I put it on the podcast like 10 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, I still have it bookmarked because it's great to hear him play.
He sounded great.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And he was my teacher's teacher.
Oh, cool.
So he was Bob Gladstone. Well, he taught a lot of people. He taught David Walter. He taught Orrin O'Brien. He taught Joe Guastafesti.
Yep.
He taught Sam Hollingsworth, who was a famous bass player in the 50s, 60s. He was principal in Pittsburgh. And I have all this encyclopedic knowledge because I'm a product of the Zimmerman School.
Yeah.
Of the Fred Zimmerman, not Oscar. They're two completely different people.
Yeah.
And not related to one another. Oscar was in the NBC Symphony, taught at Eastman, taught at Interlochen before Larry Hurst. And but back to Fred Zimmerman and the New York Philharmonic Young Persons Concerts, they show him playing, which is the only example, I think, of him playing the bass on video.
Oh, wow.
And it's worth going back there. And he's sitting principal. He was assistant principal or associate. And Bob Gladstone's still in the orchestra then. He was in the New York Philharmonic as a young guy in his 20s until he got the principal in Detroit. And then he went there for the rest of his life. But it's a really great. I mean, it's not a great performance of the elephant, but it shows you what bass playing was like in the 60s, and it shows you what Fred Zimmerman looked like when he was playing.
Oh, cool.
Really, really special. Anybody who's interested in that period of bass playing needs to see that.
Now, is that the same video that Gary Karr? Is that the same? Oh, okay,
yes,
great.
The same performance.
Okay, I'm going to go check out that.
Yeah. So if you want to see it, you go to YouTube Gary Karr Young Person's Guide or YouTube Gary Karr Bernstein.
I'll dig it up. I'll make sure to link. I'll link up to that for this since we're chatting about it, so folks.
Yeah, you should. And make sure you include, beside Gary's playing, make sure you fast forward to catch the elephant.
Yeah,
which is it's great to see Fred Zimmerman play.
Oh yeah,
and especially if you're probably a product of that school too.
It's really interesting to trace back like that, isn't it? And to see who studied with who and that sort of base pedagogy family tree. Yeah, I'm sure I'd have to think about it, but I'm sure that there's a connection there between somebody I studied
name
with.
Your teachers. And I'll tell you.
So Jeff Braditich, Michael Hovnanian was my main teacher.
He is a product of that school.
Okay. Yeah. There we go.
And maybe Joe Guastafesti was too.
Yep. Sure. Well, I've worked a lot with Joe. I never studied privately with him, but 5-6 years of bass coachings and chamber coachings with Joe. And so, okay, that's cool.
And Bob Gladstone, who I used to drive from Cleveland to Detroit once a week. I did that for 3 years to take a lesson with him, have a lesson with him. He's the one who switched me to German bow.
Oh.
And he had a lot of memorabilia from Fred Zimmerman there, because Fred Zimmerman was a painter, and he did some really interesting paintings, and Gladstone had quite a few of them. And he would tell me Fred Zimmerman stories, and
Cool.
I almost went to study with him. Instead of going to Cleveland, I was going to go to Mannes College in New York, where he taught or Manhattan, I mean, not Mannes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so a lot of those old East Coast guys were all Fred Zimmerman students.
Mm-hmm.
He was extremely prolific.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about, because Orrin O'Brien studied with Fred too,
Yes.
right? And I remember chatting with her a few years ago about that whole experience and like what he was like as a teacher. And I got to go back and listen to that practice tape, because I remember being really struck by his sound and his tone, and just like
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And Gladstone sounded just like him.
Wow.
And my most memorable lesson with Gladstone was, we were in his house, in his studio, and I was playing something, and his wife came and knocked on the door, and she opened the door and she said, "Oh, I thought that was Bob playing." And it was me.
That's cool.
I think that's maybe my best compliment I ever got.
Yeah, that's a good compliment.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when Bob was out here, well, I call him Bob now, but I never could when I was studying. It was always Mr. G.
Okay. Yeah.
But when he was out here, I had a group playing the Schuller Quartet, the Gunther Schuller Quartet.
Sure.
You know that? I'm
Oh
sure
yeah, yeah. That's a
and
snarly piece.
he was in the original group that played it in Carnegie Hall.
Oh wow.
It was him and Orrin O'Brien and Fred Zimmerman and one other, David Walter.
David Walter. Okay.
Yeah, and they were all. I'm pretty sure that was the group. I might have gotten the David Walter mixed up with somebody else, but Gladstone and Orrin O'Brien were the originals.
Wow.
And there's a recording of that out there too.
I'll dig that up.
Not on the internet, but it's out.
That original group. Yeah, I remember talking to Orrin about that experience, and what a cool lineage to be from, and
It is.
Yeah, it's really interesting to be able to trace it back like that.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Well, it's been. I can't wait to see what you're.
I should tell you the next project.
Oh, please,
I have,
please.
Which is about 3 or 4 years ago, I did sort of what seemed at the time like an experimental recording of an arrangement I made of Die Winterreise.
Oh, wow.
You know what Die Winterreise is?
Sure, the Schubert,
Schubert song cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it for bass and piano.
Oh.
And I did the whole thing. And it's sitting in my file unedited, because I did 3 or 4 days of recording of it. And now I'm going to have time to edit it and maybe put it together, and if it's good enough, I'll put it out there.
Oh, cool.
That was very experimental, but I love that song cycle, and it actually works really well on the bass.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can't wait to. Hopefully it comes together and you put it out, because I'd love to hear you playing that. I love that piece, and I'd love to hear it with bass and piano. I think that'd be a great combination. I've
heard people do. I know Scott Pingle does some Schubert songs, and I've heard him do those. He did some at the ISB convention.
When it was in San Francisco? Yeah.
No, that was in Colorado.
Oh, sure. Yeah, a few years ago.
He did a recital, and he did a couple Schubert songs, and that sort of inspired me to try that.
Wow.
So I got a really good pianist, because the piano part's very difficult for the Winterreise. So we'll see.
That's
We'll see.
great.
I'll ring your bell if I get it.
Please. Well, and if you do put it out, let's hop on FaceTime now that we got FaceTime working and chat about it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay.
It's great to it's been great to collaborate with you and to chat with you over the years. I love that we have to spend some time in person one of these days, or a little more time, but it's really fun. It's fun to see. I love going back and seeing dates from like 2008, and chatting about projects. And I've just appreciated what you've done. I think it's, from the American String Project to your, the putting the videos out on YouTube like 5-6 years ago, and just everything. It's really been fun following along
and
with
the Gary Karr
the Gary Karr. And
I thought that was would someday be some kind of a historical record that people need to see. Because he plays on those too.
He does. I think that was a wonderful setting to just sort of get it. I think it's a great historical document. It's a good word for that. It's really,
it's kind of like a living room, being in a living room.
Yeah, that's how you had it set up.
That's really how he set it up.
It was really enjoyable.
It was on purpose. On purpose.
Yeah.
And I'll pass on one other thing that your listeners would probably find interesting,
Please.
Which is I discovered a couple months ago some master classes with Rainer Zepperitz.
Rainer Zepperitz.
Rainer Zepperitz.
No, I'm adding him to my list of people I need to look up.
Okay, Rainer Zepperitz.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most famous bass section in the world, I think.
Oh.
Certainly the one with Carrion.
Yeah.
And Rainer was principal along with can't remember his name right now, but there's a Klaus Stoll.
Oh, Klaus Stoll. Sure.
Klaus Stoll. They were co-principals.
Okay.
But Rainer was sort of the principal player, and he's a big guy and big black mustache, and you can see a lot of him playing on some of the older Berlin Philharmonic films where Carrion is conducting.
Oh,
and
cool.
You can see him quite clearly there, and he's got the most energy and dynamic when he's playing in the bass section. You can see almost the whole Beethoven recitative. You can see on the Bach violin concertos, which has a big bass part in them. He's right there behind her playing, and you can watch it. And when he left, he was very close with Carrion.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got to meet him when we were in Berlin on a tour, and we went to hear the Berlin Phil. And it was one of Carrion's last concerts, and we went backstage, and I introduced myself, and that was it. But for me, it was a moment of great joy. And
Sure.
Anyway, after he left the Berlin Phil, he went to teach in Spain.
Oh.
At that famous conservatory in Madrid.
Sure.
And there's actually several hours worth, if not more, of his master classes.
Oh, really?
On YouTube.
Oh, cool.
They are on YouTube, and it's amazing. He plays, but it's all teaching, and he's a fantastic teacher. And I got so much out of that because I always wanted to hear him play by himself.
Right.
And there is one Berlin Phil rehearsal with Claudio Abbado where they do Mahler 1.
Oh.
And it's Claudio Abbado's first rehearsal with or is it Muti? No, it's Abbado. And they do Mahler first.
Oh, cool.
And he gives him a little shit about it.
Right.
He goes, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But these master classes are fantastic. I want to pass that on to all the bass players out there to go find these things. You can find them. You have to do a little digging, but they're there, and you can access them.
Okay. Wow.
And he does stuff like Kusevitsky Concerto and Bottesini Concerto, and he plays all this stuff. And I thought this couldn't possibly exist,
right?
And it does, and it's there. It's amazing. And you've been great with YouTube too. I want to tell you that. I mean, you've done so much for the bass. I give you my highest compliments for what you've done for the bass world, and the way you've really brought things together. I salute you.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, Barry. That's high praise coming from you, because I write back at you. And so it's been fun for me to be on these platforms as they evolve. And it's incredible. Like how, like something like YouTube, like, oh my goodness, like just the quantity of what's on there and how that evolves and how people are using it. It's interesting. It's something I'm trying to focus a little bit more on here going forward.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
And it's allowed me to do some of the things like the orchestra solo videos and the Gary Karr stuff, and it's allowed me to do a lot of things and put it out in the world, so that people can see it and
totally
learn from it. And every day I get some kind of comment about the YouTube things. If they're negative, I just delete them.
Right. Me too. That's a good move.
Yeah. But no, but it's great for kids and people. And some of my kids went to China last year on a tour, and they said they studied with me, and they just went crazy because they know who I am there, and that's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I know. It's incredible. Like the reach, how you can reach people. And I mean, if you think about 600,000 views, if you just think about that, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I don't know how many people are learning orchestral double bass solos, but that's a big percentage of them.
Well,
out there.
And it's the ubiquitousness of YouTube and how it works. It's a great platform.
Yep.
And I hear from people in South America and China and Korea and Russia and Israel, and they say, "Wow, it's so great! Thank you for doing this." And
it's remarkable.
Makes me feel good.
Well, I hope that Schubert makes an appearance on YouTube and other projects, and it's let's not have it not be 6 years between the last time,
Okay.
Although I'll tell you, you were one of the few people, because I had a few years where I didn't do much on the podcast, and you were one of the few people that I chatted with during those quiet years. And so I think we talked in 2014 or something like that, and I think that was probably the only interview I did that year. So you were one of the people that helped me kind of keep it going when I got pulled into other projects. So it's nice. Okay. It's nice.
Well, I'm glad.
It's that, I was looking in my notes, and I think you were on my 90th episode. You were on my 160th episode, and now you'll be on like my 700th episode. So
see, there you go.
It's been we'll not have it be 550 episodes in between. So
okay, that'd be good. That'd be good.
I appreciate it, Barry. Hey, thanks for chatting. Congratulations on the years at University of Washington and retiring and everything. And it's cool to kind of close that chapter and move on, I'm sure. But I'm gonna retire like Gary Karr retired, where that's the best kind of
I think I stopped doing what I'm doing, but then I don't.
Right.
And that's what he's done.
Oh yeah, no, it's the best.
He hasn't stopped.
Oh, no.
He was 16 when he started, or 15, or whatever, 12 maybe. Because his whole family was bass players.
Yeah.
His father, his grandfather.
It's incredible.
So that's, I don't know what I'm going to do, to be honest, but I have a few things planned.
Yeah, I'm sure it will all unfold.
And I'm gonna come to San Francisco, and we'll go to the Tadich Grill.
We'll get some lobster at the Tadich Grill.
Lobster thermidor.
Early or late, though.
Lobster thermidor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for chatting. I appreciate it. And I'll get this put together. I have a whole pile of notes of things we were talking about, so I've got a lot of things to look up. Speaking of YouTube, I'm going to be spending some time on YouTube looking up some good stuff. Thanks again, Barry. Congratulations, and it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Again, I linked up to a lot of what we talked about as much as I could in the show notes, so check that out, and you will go down several satisfying YouTube rabbit holes. Thank you for listening. I hope you are well, no matter where you are. If you're like me, you're in your house. I've been in my house for a while. Fortunately, we moved I don't know if it's yes, it's fortunately. Just as the pandemic was breaking, we were moving into a new place, which can be bad timing, of course, but the good news is this place is sunny and bright and very peaceful and has this beautiful outdoor space. So I'm able to sit outside a lot. It's been nice weather generally here in San Francisco, and trying to just check in with the news a couple of times a day and try not to let my anxiety spiral out of control. I hope that you are able to do the same, and I hope that a year from now or sooner than that, we can all look back on this and just scratch our heads at how topsy-turvy everything got for a while. So we'll see, but we're in this together. Thank you so much for listening. I just totally, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time. I also appreciate the team that puts these together. I would have quit this long ago were it not for Trevor Jones, Mitch Mooring, Krista Copper, Steve Hinchy, and Michael Cooper. Mitch makes beautiful basses. I hope that if you need a new bass, you look to Sarah Nielsen as a role model and inspiration. She recently bought one of Mitch's basses. She's got a bunch of videos she's putting up of her playing that on Instagram, and they're just gorgeous. He won an award at ISB was it this summer? What was it? 2019. Wow, where's my brain? Okay, so, and we can't wait for 2021, the ISB convention. I'm glad that is not coming up this summer. So thank you to Mitch. Thank you to everybody who helps me with this. Thank you most of all to you for taking the time and listening to this. And if you made it to the end, my friend, you are a true fan. I'm Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.